Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Sharon Flake. And she's here to share with us her new novel, The Life I'm In. This is the powerful and long-anticipated companion to The Skin I'm In, which is Sharon Flake's modern classic presenting the unflinching story of Char, a young woman trapped in the underworld of human trafficking. Now, many of you know Sharon. She exploded into the literary scene with her novel The Skin I'm In 1998, which was named the Publisher Weekly's Flying Start. Since then, she's become a multiple Coretta Scott King Author Award winner, and many of her novels have received the ALA Notable and Best Book for Young Adult citation from the American Library Association. So let's welcome to the show, Sharon Flake.
Thank you very much, Marianne. How are you?
Oh my goodness, I am excited to have you here is how I'm doing. I love your books. And when I heard you had a new one out, I thought, my goodness, we need to talk. And I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, The Life I'm In is my maybe 12th book. There are about 2 million copies of my books on the planet. I write for children and YA, young adults, and this is one of those young adult books. Really, The Life I'm In is a follow-up to The Skin I'm in which that's my biggest selling book, right? And that's about a young African-American girl who gets bullied because people don't like her skin color, they don't like how she dresses. So she decides, in the infinite wisdom of a 13-year-old, if I just hang out with the bully, my life will get better because she'll take care of me, but it gets worse. And so that book is about just loving yourself the way you are, learning to stand in your truth and find your voice. The bully in that book is Charlize, who is the protagonist in The Life I'm In. And for years, people have asked, whatever became of Charlize? Did her sister put her on that bus? Because her sister threatened at the end of the book, like, listen, if you can't behave and get it together, maybe grandmom and them can help you out. And so when we start this book, Charlize's sister has gone through with her threat. It's about a year or so after, in the book world, The Skin I'm In, and she's about to get on that bus, but she doesn't want to. And it's the first time we really see that Char has some vulnerabilities, right? In which she calls up Malika, who she hasn't talked to in a year, and says, please, have your mother intervene with my sister and keep me from being sent away. And it's the first time readers get to see that Malika, who's always been so shy and intimidated by Char, puts up some boundaries. So what's the story about? It's about human trafficking, right? It's about second chances and resilience. And it's about helping each other in our time of need. So it's about a couple of different things.
Well, and it seems that so, I think a lot of people can relate to this because it's really, based on probably what life is like for many people, and as we are going through one challenge or another, just how as people we stand up and move through these challenges.
I love that because that is true. Charlize, in the beginning of the novel, The Life I'm In, you can hear that she's at that point where she really wants to change and be different. She just doesn't know how. So the first line of the book, if I can recall myself, is, maybe I was born bad. Some people are, And before the end of that first chapter, she says, the sun looks different every day, but I'm no different. But she wants so much to be different. And being a teenager, she gets on that bus. She finds out some stuff, right? That, wait a minute, my sister is growing and maturing. Charlize is 16. These are my words putting him into her mouth right now. But my sister is growing and she's maturing and she's changing, and she doesn't want me anymore. And all I want to do is be home. right? I worked with young people for a lot of years who were in foster placement. And I'll tell you, regardless of how their parents treated them, almost to the child, they wanted to go home. So Char wants to go home. She wants to stay home. But when she's on that bus, she gets some information that makes her, I guess she doesn't make her, but she makes a decision that, you know what, if I can't go home and I don't want to go to grandma's, I think I'll just run away and be on my own.
And how many children do that every year where they're either put in foster care or things are going on at home where they feel that they can't control it and they just take off? And I really found it interesting how you wove the human trafficking piece into this, because I think it's so important, a dialogue that needs to happen.
A lot of religious organizations and community groups have been tackling and taking this issue on for years. And we know that the government and the United Nations has been sort of trying to get governments around the world to come up with a common definition of trafficking. And not only that, to stop it, to slow it down, to identify it. Because sometimes when we see young people, or we hear about young people that have been trafficked, people don't always believe that, right? That they have been. They think, oh, you want to do this. But the United Nations says that children who are 17, young people 17 and under, who have been forced, well, you don't even have to be forced, of course, if you have been sort of propositioned, paid to engage in sexual acts under 18 years old, and you have been trafficked, right? And so it happens on every continent. It happens almost in every community. Sometimes we think, well, that just happens over there in certain countries, or that just happens in certain communities. But middle-class children are impacted, right? Middle-class young adults and women, urban youth, boys, girls. And we have to be aware of it. It's happening. It's happening. It's $150 billion business in terms of trafficking overall, right? So there's sexual exploitation is a part of that. That's a $99 billion business. And then there's labor trafficking, right? Where people take young people and put them in mines and work them, or bring them to different countries. And maybe you think you're coming to America or even South America somewhere, and you're going to start a job, and all of a sudden somebody has you in somebody's home, and you're working day and night and for months and years, and you aren't able to get out. So that's labor trafficking, or a form of it. And child soldiering is a form of trafficking, right? 10-year-olds, 6-year-olds we see in countries who are being forced to fight wars.
Yeah, it's so important to have this discussion and talk about this. And I really appreciate how you look at the whole spectrum of trafficking in a way that our listeners can look at it, go, gosh, you know what? Maybe I need to investigate this more and learn about this more and be more involved, because I've also heard that, like, when Super Bowl happens, there's more trafficking that happens in the whatever cities, or any kind of playoffs.
Well, when you have large sports games, it goes up significantly, right? When you have young people that might be coming from school, sometimes there are just many, many ways and many opportunities for predators to take advantage of young people. And with the onslaught of technology, that is a big, big way that's business is being conducted as well, and ways they can reach out to young people, so that for the parent or the teacher who thinks, well, not in my community, we're like in a just nice bedroom sort of community, these people have a way of reaching through your computer and finding your child. And you know what? I'm hoping that people will look at the life I'm in and understand that it's not just about my child either, right? Because one of the questions I hope people will ask when they read the book is, am I my neighbor's keeper? I mentioned that Malika and Charlize were, doing this dance, right? Charlize was bullying Malika in the first book. And what I've been asking young people lately is, could you forgive your bullier, right? Somebody who bullied you. And a lot of them, say no. And I understand that. But in this book, Malika does reach back out and hold Charlize's hand. And because she does that, Charlize is able to get to the other side. In fact, there are many sort of human angels that show up along the way that help Charlize in a time of need. Now, Charlize is no sort of victim in the sense of, I can't survive at all on my own. She does a good job of surviving as well as a 16-year-old can as a runaway, right? But to make it out at the end, she's needed some individuals to show up. And I wanted to plant those seeds. I wanted us to always remember for young people that might be young runaways, for somebody that might be struggling in school, for somebody whose parents might be divorced and they don't think they have anybody to talk to, that if we hang in there and if we look around, there might be a neighbor, a friend, or a stranger that can help us get to our next sort of mile marker.
Yeah. I mean, when kids act out, there's something going on. And I like how, you talk about bullies just don't appear. They're mean for a reason. And, it's our job to get beyond what's going on with them, externally and figure out what's going on with them internally.
Well, this is what I love about, even though I wrote the book, but this is what I love about Char. I think Charlize Jones in The Life I'm In is my most sort of complete character, because she goes from being a bully in one book, right? And in a sense, maybe for a good reason, or not, maybe if it's not for good reasons, we understand the reason. She has been left down a couple of times, and she's been left down a couple of times because her parents were killed, and they were shot brutally. Her sister did the best she could to raise her, but she didn't have a lot of skills herself, so she had people over for dinners and selling meals, and Charlize had to perform as a mini adult in a sense. Nothing happened to her sexually or anything there, but just in terms of being up to 2:00 in the morning and serving food and strangers coming into your room. And so I realized during my research that those things made her really vulnerable to trafficking. And you know what? My research showed that only one encounter with social services can make you vulnerable to trafficking. Isn't that amazing?
Oh my goodness. I would never even think about that. When you were doing the research for this book, was there anything that surprised you?
I'll tell you maybe what surprised me was my reaction, right? How bothered I was by what I was reading. And you hear it on the news and it bothers you, right? You're concerned. That's one reason why I did it. But when you're reading article after article, you're talking to people, and in your mind, you know that these are teenagers you're reading about and thinking about. It did bother me. And there were times when I had to put the material down and come back to it a little bit later. And then there's the challenge as the writer of a novel that I have to be able to interpret that material and have my protagonist experience some things in a way that 14 and 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds could receive when you're talking about a heavy topic. So I like the way I did it. I like the way Char does some things. I'm always trying to remind you that she's a child, because a lot of times when African-American young people are dealing with things, we don't always give them the grace of saying, you know what, this is what children do. They run away when you wish they wouldn't, right? They make rash decisions. And so from the beginning, I'm always trying to remind people, she's a young person. She's a child. Please don't forget that. And when she's trafficking and she's in the home and she's with all these girls, there's a moment for Christmas that happens. And that was a moment for me to remind, again, readers that what do we think of more family-like than Christmas, more kid-like than Christmas? And that was a way of me trying to remind readers that these are children. Let's not forget, because if we forget they're children and we notice them on the street or read an article about them, then we're prone to say, oh, well, they decided. They chose that. Oh, I don't, who feels sorry for them?
And that would be a horrible thing to say because, these children are still having their brains develop. They don't make really good decisions based off the information they have, and especially in today's world of social media, it can be just so much for them to take. And so I think, really making it that people can understand how this happens and, you're not powerless. You can look at your neighbor, as you're saying, take, kind of be your neighbor's keeper in a way. I think that is a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah. I love to write for children and I love to write for young adults. And I love to give them reasons in my novel to pause and think about some things and see themselves in my characters, in the skin I'm in. That book is in Korean. It's about to come out in Italian. And what I've loved about that journey, and that book is 22 years old, is how many young people read that book and say, hey, that's me. A gay Italian boy in Boston came up to me one day and said, he was a sixth grader, Sharon Flake, I started a club called The Skin I'm In for gay students. A Latinx boy in New York who wouldn't read any books. And he read The Skin I'm In and loved it so much that he went and translated it into Spanish for his grandmother. So the best thing we writers can do is to write stories where young people find themselves. And it'll be easy for someone to say, well, my daughter or my kid, well, they can't understand someone who's been trafficked. But that's where you get to the humanity of people, right? That's what I write about, right? People and their humanity. And in humanity, we make really great decisions, right? So I made a great decision to come to college at 18, and it changed my life because that's where I realized I had a talent for writing. But when I was about 10, I might have been younger, I didn't make a great decision when I went to the corner store and I swiped a bag of potato chips. I don't steal at all. I never do. But I was 10 and I think about that now and scratching my head saying, Sharon Flake, what in the world made you go take potato chips? You didn't need those potato chips. But when you're 10 or 12 or 15, something happens to you and you make some goofy decisions. And thank God, sometimes they're nothing. Nobody noticed. That didn't cost me anything. It wasn't I shouldn't have done it, but right, it wasn't the biggest crime in the world. But then sometimes they make decisions and it does. And that's Charlize when she decides, I will not go to my grandparents' house. And she stays on that bus. And before that trip is over, somebody has already tried to solicit her, right? And she's 16. And I think people looked at her first book, The Skin I'm In, and probably looked at her life then and said, oh, what a terrible family life she has. And I caution people not to judge so quickly from the outside what you're seeing. Because what her sister and her parents put into Charlize are the things that help her survive also on that trip, right? Her sister taught her some things about the world. Her sister taught her how to, clean up and take care of herself. And maybe we don't want a 13-year-old to have those particular skills, but they helped her to survive. So the good and the not so good of her experiences with her sister were able to help her on her journey. I don't know if you had a question, sorry.
No, I love listening to you talk about your books because I know these are for young adults. There are many adults that are reading these as well and just absolutely in love with them because your writing style is just magnificent. And when you, gosh, I mean, how does it feel empowering millions of young people with your books?
I thank you. I feel like God has really just blessed me, right? Um, it's an honor, it's a privilege. I tell people shy and insecure a lot of my life. I always had a big mouth. So when you have a big mouth and you're a chatty Cathy and you talk a lot, people can think that you're like confident. But I wasn't. And once I wrote The Skin I'm In and I went on the road and was like, oh my God, I have to go speak in all these schools. And some of them I spoke to 20 people, but a lot of times it was hundreds. Sometimes in Texas, it was a couple thousand. But along the way, I would let them know that I'm shaking in my boots. And I tell young people, I would tell them like they were the first people I sort of outed myself with, right? That I told, I wasn't a good speller in school. In fact, I really stunk at it in school. Or, I was in my office in my 40s crying because I just thought I couldn't do this job, even though I was getting raises and good evaluations. And what happened was they would open up and they would start sharing about being bullied, about not being able to spell, or emailing me and said, Miss Sharon, I really can't spell. Could you suggest a book that I could read? Or Miss Sharon,
oh my gosh,
I'm just like you. Because I tell people I have this quirky brain. I'm like, I never could hold in a lot of information. So I'd read a book, and I still do, and read it and read it and read it, and can't even remember what I read. And then to have a kid stand up and say, that's me. And it wasn't easy for them. So I'm always grateful. I feel like young people and I have been in this journey together. And now they're writing me back in your 30s and they're saying, I had a baby and I bought The Skin I'm In for the baby to read when she's older. Or, you changed my life. I'm a teacher and I hated to read until I read your book. And now I'm a teacher. It gives me goosebumps.
Oh my gosh, I just love that because it's making such an impact for young people that maybe feel like, maybe they can't move forward because they have things going on with spelling. Hey, I was there too, I get it, and the whole aspect of going, you know what, I've had all these things that have happened, but at the same time, I could be a successful writer. I think that gives people, especially young people, such encouragement to just follow their dreams.
I think it really does. And it's that thing that you are not alone, right? I think so often we really do think we're alone in the world. I think young people are gravitated towards The Skin I'm In because it was the first, they can trust Malika's voice. She's so honest about her experiences. And I think if you're being bullied, if you're being gossiped about, if you're young, you have a tendency to think it's just you because you really don't want to share that with too many people. Then you open up The Skin I'm In, and this girl is telling you her story, and she's brutally frank about it. And she's funny sometimes, and she's showing you how long it lasted and what it took for her to get out. And then you think, okay, I can do that. And then you have the life I'm in. And maybe those aren't going to be, hopefully, your experiences, that traffic experience. But there are other experiences you're going to have that might be like Char's, which is, you know what? I feel like I want to be different, but I don't know how to be different, right? I feel like this experience at home or work or school is not working. And I'm about to make this decision, and I don't even know if it's a good decision. And I think that's why young people read books and read the same books over and over and over again. They are digesting that thing and seeing that person and recognizing bits and pieces of themselves and cheering for those characters and crying with them and getting life lessons out of those, right? So I think they read in a different way than adults read, right? They're not intentionally reading for life lessons, but they get those life lessons. And you know what? They'll read a book 2, 3, 10. I have people that say, "Oh, I read it every year." You know, it's like, wow.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. What a powerful message for young people. If they're reading the book every year, they're really kind of taking to heart some of the lessons that are in the book. And I
Right.
think that that really helps them move forward, maybe where where young people maybe feel like they're not really supported or taken care of in the way that they need.
Well, I had a Caucasian young girl years ago who wrote to me, and she says, "I'm going to a little country town." And I think she was leaving the city. And she said, "Miss Sharon, I don't want to go." She said, "But I have my copy of the Skin I'm with me."
Oh my gosh.
Right. And
Oh,
so it meant something. Or the Japanese woman who wrote to me early on with that book saying, "Hey, I'm in England, I'm 22 years old, and your protagonist and I aren't a lot alike in different ways, but I was bullied too. And I want to translate this book into Japanese for school," which she did. And she sent me a lovely copy. And so my hope for the life I'm in is that it will have a similar impact where people read it and feel transformed. Right. I'm getting letters back. They're starting to come back. "Oh, it's funny. It made me think. It made me cry. It made me cheer." And for the people who saw the Skin I'm in and said, "Oh, Charlize is such a bully. She is one of the most iconic bullies in literature." Now they're saying, "Oh my God, I never thought I could love her." But in the life I'm in, I just fell in love with her. And me too. Right. As the writer, I had a change, right? Where I went from having, "Oh, she's a bully in the first book. She's not my favorite character," to now she's one of my favorite characters.
oh my gosh. Well, and I think you also touch on a topic that maybe young people don't know about. When we talk about human trafficking, like what are some of the signs and what does that look like? And so I think in many ways, it's also like a warning sign saying, hey, watch out, be careful of this.
Well, one thing we see Charlize do a lot in this book is she's constantly looking around, right? Constantly checking. And I interviewed someone who had been trafficked, and we were across the table from each other, and I'm like, one time I looked back, I'm like, what are you looking at? And she explained to me, she said, when you're on the street like that, you always have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to know if somebody's coming, maybe because you just worked, or maybe because you're worried about the predator coming back. So that's one thing. Somebody that's constantly sort of checking as if somebody or something is coming for them. That's one thing. I think if you have young kids, young people who sort of miss school a lot, they're here and they're there. That's a sign that something is going on. It may not be trafficking, it may be, but something is sort of going on. If they're afraid to talk, in the presence or around the police, right? And so or if you think something's going on, no, we don't want this police, we don't want the police involved. Sort of things like that that make you wonder and suspicious about what might be going on with this young person.
Yeah, they're red flags to really pay
They're
attention
red
to.
flags. Someone that's around someone that is significantly older, but it doesn't, it could be the opposite sex. A lot of times it is, but it's not always. Significantly older, and you're looking at that, and that relationship doesn't quite sort of stack up. Once a woman told me they were coming from a basketball game. She said they're driving through the parking lot, and she sees this young girl who looks like she's 12 with this old guy. She says, the way she was dressed, that's the other thing. It just didn't look, something felt off. And the other part is sort of trust your gut sometimes. It's like, well, something feels a little bit off here. And she said, it bothered her so that she circled back around. But when she came back, whoosh, they were gone.
Mm-mm.
And I said, most likely that is exactly what was going. We talked about the game. So if you're at a large game and you see this sort of dynamic, for her, she came back. She said, I decided I'm going to come back and I'm going to call the police and I'm going to let them know and take that chance and let them know what I see going on. But it was just a little bit too late. But she tried. And in the life I'm in, Charlize is in a store, right? And Anthony is trying to proposition another young girl. And Charlize is of the mind that I'm in this, but I don't want anybody else to be in this. Right. So she never loses her sense of, A, her eye is always on home, and B, like, I don't want anybody else to be in this if I can help it. And so it means that she stays in a bit of trouble with Anthony, but she's in this store and he's trying to persuade this girl, and Charlize is on the side trying to, like, no, you don't want to no, this is not what you think. And when she goes outside and Anthony is still behind with this young girl, she sees a man and she decides this will be my opportunity to get away. And she's Mr., but she doesn't feel like she can get too far from that store without, raising Anthony's, ire and attention. And the guy just keeps looking at his phone. He hears her. Right. So in a way, in this world, we see some of these young people, whether they're being trafficked, whether they're homeless, whether they're runaways. We do see them on a certain level, but we don't always want to see them. And he's my sort of representation of the part of us that sees but does not care to see.
Yeah, that's such a thing that I think people really need to search their souls when it comes to seeing children in situations like that. My goodness, Sharon, I mean, we could talk all day. I just love your books. I love your writing style. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
They can connect with me at my website, which is sharon-g-flake.com. They can connect with me at Twitter, which is, I think, Sharon Flake, and Facebook at Flake Sharon. I'm easy. You could Google me. I'm all over the internet. If you want to buy my books, there's Amazon. Please support your local indies, and they will have the books. And if they don't have them, you just ask them to order them, and they'll make sure you get them.
Yeah, they're so good. And our indie stores need all of our support right now. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You were wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new novel, The Life I'm In. The Life I'm In is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Make sure to support your indie bookstores by purchasing it from them. Again, if you'd like to connect with Sharon, you can at sharon-g-flake.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.